And I want to comment both for Jason and Ryan that every governing body, in terms of how do they deal with things, has a code of conduct. And Rick is a code of conduct guy, and he delivers it with his parent group and his players, and he walks the talk. He holds them accountable. One team at one time with that association. And he is a leader that can do that. And in one of our sessions, talking about his code of conduct, he's going to add something to it. Cage fighting in dressing rooms with kids. And Hal Turse is dealing with that issue, and probably why he left this call with his team. And there's lawyers involved. So we're talking an ethical coach and behaviors that are occurring. When we talk about the World Junior players and what went on to cause the turmoil in the organization, it's because they haven't done this type of stuff from the get-go, from the time they laced their skates on and grew up coaching their kids, going from level to level. So the code of conduct works, but it's just it's reactive, plugging a hole. If this happens, well, I had the rule laid out. Not why. Why do we need a rule? Well, if you know your why, the rule's gonna, work. Rick, can you talk a bit about that? Because I know you and I just feel the mission statement complements what you do, and you maybe don't need the mission statement exercise, but average coaches do. They need ethical guidance. Rick?
Well, to start, Wally, I agree with you. I think that the mission statement and the code of conduct are complementary. I believe that one without the other is probably not as effective as the two together. I will contradict you on the idea that you just mentioned, that the code of conduct is reactionary. In my case in particular, it was developed to be proactive, to lay out all of the pitfalls as much as you could before you even hit the ice. Let the players and the parents know what they're in for, what the season, how it's going to play out, why we're doing things in a certain fashion, and it's all by design. It's not just happenstance, something I thought of on the drive over to the rink for practice or game. It laid out how we were going to conduct our business, which is the terminology I used for years. It's the way we do our business. It's who we are. It goes back to the culture thing. But it also, in my opinion, it stifled a lot of the issues that other teams have, and I'm mentoring coaches this year, and virtually all of them are dealing with these, largely, in my opinion, because I didn't get to them early enough to help them set the season up in that fashion. So now they're proactively putting out fires that they didn't know would happen, or didn't counsel their parent group or their player group. These are things we need to avoid because they will create issues that are going to undo what we're trying to do here. So I consider it to be extremely proactive, because what could happen is laid out, what the consequences will be is laid out, and then the key part is, as Wally said, you have to walk the talk. You have to, if there's discipline required, you have to execute on it, and that sets the lesson for everybody else. It's part and parcel, or observing, that we just don't do these things. All of that has built a culture, if you will, to use the term, where we win more often than we lose. It's not manufactured wins, it's a result of the process. And again, that's a term that gets overused sometimes in our environment, but in my case, I believe that is what happens. You overcome things in a game situation, you overcome things in a tournament situation, because you're prepared for them, because you have a way of dealing with them, because the players know what the options are, and you trust them to make good decisions. An example of that is, again, I get my share of criticism the same as every other coach, but I get a player who makes a mistake in a critical part of the game. I hear about it fairly shortly after I leave the ice or the bench. Sometimes not even out of the hallway, although I try to prevent that. But then a few games later, you put that player right back in the same situation, and he performs better than he did the time before. And yet you still get the criticism. Why would you put him in there again? You know what he's going to do. No, I don't. We've worked at it, him and I, our group. Now I want to see if he's learned the lesson. How else do you do that? But that's the kind of observer that you get on the other side that can't see the forest for the trees. So, as far as the code of conduct, to answer Wally's question, I feel it's very constructive, and it is proactive, and it does allow you how to react in a fashion that you'd already dictated, or probably shouldn't use that term nowadays, but you've laid out how things are going to be dealt with if they should arise.
Yeah.
Hopefully that makes sense to everybody.
Very good, Rick.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Michael? And then Tim.
Yeah, no, I was just going to chime in because I didn't warn Jason and certainly not Ryan, but this could go on for hours, guys. So just I just want to be respectful of your time and understand, because sometimes I've logged in, gone for a workout, and come back, and we're still having a great conversation. But I just wanted to give you guys the heads up, only because I don't want you to be. But again, the conversations are great. If you can stay on with us, awesome. But just be respectful of your time.
Michael. Yeah, I appreciate that. I love that you meet weekly. I love that there's no. It's like, it's going to be an hour. It's like, it's going to go until we run out of steam today, and then we'll talk again next week. It's great. Ryan and I actually do have a meeting we're both scheduled to be in about 2 minutes, I'm afraid. But I appreciate that, Michael.
And
Tim.
yeah, I'll just quickly interject, and I totally agree with Rick in that any code of conduct would really be hopefully a proactive exercise and document. I also totally agree that it does go exactly, and you guys all know this, hand in hand with the mission statement. The mission statement is creating the culture, hopefully, of who we are and what we do. And then the code of conduct is kind of the follow-up accountability. Okay, this is who we are, this is what we do. If this happens, then here's the accountability, and this is what, the possible consequences are. So I totally agree with Rick on that regard. And it sort of brought to mind, and it's simplistic, but years ago I saw a video on by the old Notre Dame football coach. I'm struggling to think of his name now at the top of my head. But his code of conduct was Lou Holtz. His code of conduct was, and his set of rules was very simply, do what's right, avoid what's wrong, and never do anything to hurt the team. Now, that is all encompassing. It's very simple. It's something you can always have front and center of your mind as a coach, and the players can. Of course, there needs to be lots of background to that. So, and again, in your mission statement, what is right, what is wrong, and what are the types of things that hurt the team? If you have those discussions, that's a very, very simple, easy thing that everybody can carry with them daily, and you can always refer back to. And you can always have discussions around if something comes up. Well, is this right? You can have that discussion. Is it or is it not? Why is it? Why is it not? Is it wrong? Does it hurt the team? And it's a really, really simple, effective thing that I've tried to use and implement in my years coaching. So I just thought I'd throw that in.
Ryan?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say an enormous thank you for the opportunity to be here. I love these conversations, and if I did not have this call with Jason, I'd probably be on with you for another hour plus. So I just wanted to first of all say thanks, and I just wanted to kind of, Tim, you hit on something, and it relates to Rick's code of conduct, and I love the proactive approach and the educational approach. But I just want to share the one thing that one of our trainers, Kelly Kratz, Jason, one of our lead national trainers, said about 4 years ago in a workshop that's always stuck with me, is within our codes of conduct or within any of our conversation, we're really good at telling people what not to do. But the phrase that she said that's always stuck with me is, you can't do a don't. So if all we're saying is don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, we're leaving it open to their interpretation to figure out, okay, what can I do? And that's where we can run into a lot of real big challenges, especially with parents who are obviously emotionally invested within their own kids and that side of things. So the more we can phrase things of do this and this is why, that's a world of a difference. And it's the same thing with our kids as we're coaching them, right? I have my son plays mite hockey, and the beginning of the season, his coach was like, not through the middle, not through the middle. I'm like, well, first of all, kids usually don't hear your first word. So all they're consuming is through the middle, right? And then secondly, okay, well, what does that mean, right? And so I just made a subtle suggestion to him. I said, hey, why don't you, if you know you want them to go to the boards and pass to the boards, why don't you say boards instead of not through the middle, right? Why don't you give a directional, piece of advice as opposed to a what not to do piece of advice? And so he started doing it, and just immediate change in the way the kids operated was noticeably different. And he was giving positive directional instruction as opposed to the fix it instruction. And so just the more I would encourage it, and I do apologize that Jason and I have to jump on this other call, and I would love to continue any of these conversations individually with any of you. But the more we can be do centric as opposed to do not centric, it helps tremendously.
Brian, before you leave, in our experience, we've talked about exactly what you've said. We've got to go from yelling to telling. And what you just did is told them in a very abbreviated picture, get the picture away. But the next step is asking before you tell.
Yes.
And that's part of our coach mentorship. The art of coaching is changing how we coach in terms of affecting and engaging the young players.
Absolutely.
Rick.
Absolutely.
Your
Well,
speaker.
thank you guys. I'm so sorry to do this,
Thank
but
you, guys.
you have to jump off.
Jason.
But real
Thanks so
pleasure.
much. Thanks, Jason.
Good to
Yeah,
see
thank
you.
you all.
Appreciate your time, fellas.
We'll see you soon.
Take care.
Come on again anytime, either of you, and
Love it.
even your trainers could
Love it.
join on and talk about what they're doing and listen in. It may be all hockey at times, but we do get into the perspective pieces very often.
Well, we've got a lot of hockey trainers down here that I'm sure would absolutely love to join you. So I
So
will
let them
make
know
sure to
about
get-
it. Yeah. Pass the link on to them.
Okay.
That we're on Thursdays, and we like to be interactive, as you've discovered, and you're finding out about each other, and the consequence is trust and respect.
Yes.
That's what's missing, and we're trying to get a culture that we're trust and expect foundation. So, Rick, your hand was up.
Thank you all.
Awesome,
Thank you
guys.
Yes.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
care.
Thanks, fellas. I was just going to reiterate, Wally, that with respect to the code of conduct and in as well the mission statement, that timing is critically important. And in that sense, I mean, you don't get the same result if you introduce either or both after you've had a problem. It's more significant if you present it at the start of the year before any of the problems that you know are coming manifest. And just further, like I sent Wally an update of my code last week after our discussion. It's been evolved over literally 40 years of coaching. It's a 4-page document. It covers a lot of bases, and it's a running document on what has happened and how do we not allow it to happen in future. And to some degree, it lays out what are the things that we do, as opposed to the things that we will not allow to happen, or we don't want to, and if they do, we will deal with them quite quickly and quite harshly if the situation warrants. Defer to Mike.
Yeah,
Michael.
No, I'm just going to say selfishly, I'm just going to wait for Wally to edit this up and send this to our lacrosse board who met the other night with 60 programs, and the comment came up because USA Lacrosse would like everybody to start addressing these proactive culture moments and thinking about code of conducts. And I couldn't believe that, the folks that said, they go, oh yeah, we do a code of conduct, the parents sign it, and then they send it back. And then, the questions start going, well, where does the code of conduct go? I don't know. It just goes in it's emailed back. Does anybody review it? Well, they read it, didn't they? And they read it with their child. And it was just amazing to me that there was no like workshop within the code of conduct. It was like, well, I signed the code of conduct, so now therefore I shouldn't have any problems. And the answer always is, well, we still have problems. And I guess so my dilemma is selling that, right? Is getting, well, the code of conduct's great. It's a piece of paper and they signed it and the kids signed it, but how are we implementing the pieces of the code of conduct, working through a mission statement, setting it up so that the code of conduct actually is a living, breathing thing, not just a document they sign to get out of, being sued down the line. And I think that's where that's to me where the disconnect mostly is in the youth athletic world. So this will be a good episode to send to that group.
Rick?
Again, Mike, something you said is, a piece of paper that's delivered, signed, you don't know if they've read it or understood it. I always made a point of presenting it twice. Once to the parent group, line by line, going over what I mean, so that there's the minimal opportunity for any confusion or misunderstanding. And then likewise with the player group, so that they know exactly what's being discussed here and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. The idea of just circulating a document, having people sign off that they read and understand, in my experience, has not worked very well.
No, and that's why I love Wally's mission statement and the fact that you're building your mission statement and your culture statement or your code of conduct together and allowing the people in your organization to build that code of conduct. I mean, that's obviously you need to present what you're looking for, but having their buy-in and understanding of why we have a code of conduct is so important. It's not just signing a piece of paper. This is our core values of who we are. And again, it goes back to, it's more important than at this point the technical aspect of what we're teaching, because we got to be able to keep the kids and the parents in a place where we can train them. And we can't train them if we're kicking them off the ice all the time or off the field, or they're getting suspended and they're hurting the rest of the class. We need to make sure that our athletes on the field are working together for the good of the game, but for to support each other ultimately. To Tim's point, and that mission, that Notre Dame mission statement or code of conduct.
Rick, I wanted to comment. Thanks, Mike, for that idea. And Rick, I've written a document that I've shared with Barry where I've looked at Coach 1, ethical coaching modules, the exercises done. Now that's half ice hockey. You don't need a code of conduct. Yet, Coach 2, whole ice hockey, I'm going to add to that module the code of conduct, having done the mission statement exercise. So you review that, but you must review the code of conduct, create that fridge magnet, because the fridge magnet, when they look at, if there's a violation, which means the code of conduct was violated, on the fridge magnet, it is a reminder something they're complaining about, that they're not doing right. It has to be addressed. And some coaches, they're violating the code of conduct. They're not, They don't know how to behaviorally coach. They shorten the bench, they scream, they yell. And players are taking bad penalties, staying out too long. Well, you know how to deal with that, Rick. But we still have to educate the coaches, the parents together. So definitely a partnership there in the timing of when to do everything. And you're right. You do it before the season starts. You say you do it a second time. When is that? Do you review it or?
No, what I meant there, Wally, was that I reviewed the code of conduct with both groups, the player group,
Separately, okay.
so they all had it at the same time in the same, they could have their commentary as the players. And then I went upstairs after practice when the parent meeting was on, and we reviewed it again, page by page. I'm just going to add too, like when I was doing midget AAA, where you have a couple of weeks of tryout camp and you have the parents' attention, I would post a code of conduct in the arena, and I would have a brief comment with the parents on the first couple of days to bring it to their attention that it's there, that they should review it line by line, they should understand it, and they should be willing and ready to discuss it when the time comes, should their son make the team. So it was out there, as I say, up to 10, 14 days before we got to that final team selection point, where the players would get it and then the parents would get it in a separate session. So they had every opportunity to be well familiarized and ready to challenge. And I even offered that I could change anything that they suggested, as long as it was adding and not deleting anything from the code, because it was well founded. It was based on experience and so on and so forth.
Tim?
Thanks, Wally. A couple things. Well, I guess the first thing, I just was curious, Wally, why you think there's no code of conduct needed for half ice hockey?
Good question.
I mean, I think anytime you have people involved, you know, we're not talking about just on ice stuff. We're talking about off ice behaviors, maybe more importantly, off ice behaviors. But I think it's
No, I know where you're coming from, Tim, and right now I know it's not in the part of the Coach 1 program. It is started in Coach 2, and the reason, yeah, it would help, but it's sort of like the consequence, the things we're going to address. In other words, it's reacting to the behaviors. This one is just knowing what you're there for and what you're doing, and at the next level as an activity. The mission statement still is reviewed by coaches who have done it if it's mandated. They talk about how it worked for them, how they might do it differently, and then introducing the code of conduct then and the effectiveness of that, as opposed to this is the way you have to do things, which a code of conduct is, in fact, a rule, a list of your rules, your understanding. The mission statement they've created. It's not created by you. You're a part of it with your staff, but the parents have created that mission statement and hold each other accountable to the behaviors. The coach uses the code of conduct to deal specifically with the players, which also impacts the parents because they're a part of that. So that's my rationale, and I'm sure I'm not going to be around long enough if it's ever mandated, whatever they decide to do, and I will share with everybody. I've outlined modules imagining at every level of coaching, whether it's USA or Canada, what can you do in terms of an ethical coaching module in 1 hour at every level to provide that step-by-step process and reinforcement of ethical coaching all the way up the ladder, instead of HP1 where you take a 6-hour course and how to deal with issues after they happen. So I'm just working. That's what I mean by being proactive, is so that we don't have to go to court over something. And it's going to still happen, and I'm just brainstorming here for the, people like yourselves and eventually people like Barry. They're in a position to implement these things and experiment with them hands-on. And we're not. We've been there, done that. We know the value, and scratch our heads about why isn't it happening? And the conversation's great, Tim. So does that make sense?
Well, yeah, yes and no. Like I still think anytime you have people involved, you need a set of was what we're talking about, like you know, some way to hold people accountable and a set of expectations or behavior both on and off the ice. And you know, half ice, full ice, doesn't matter. You're dealing with people, and it's always, I think, helpful and good if you have a mission statement. Then, and from that comes your code of conduct, really and ideally. And that so at any level, I think the code of conduct is an important piece. And sort of getting back to, you know, as Rick was talking about, you know, sort of midget AAA tryouts, and again, in any kind of an environment where you have a tryout situation, you know, it's a tricky coaching thing because you as a coach have your own sort of set of you know, obviously on ice and of course some off ice expectations. And you know, in an ideal world, you create a mission statement with the team and with the parents, and from that, with them, you create a set of code of conduct of accountability and expectations. And so the tricky part is, you know, you as a coach, you might want to relate some of your own personal expectations at a tryout situation, but after that, you really need to, in terms of the players and the parents feeling some ownership of the expectations, accountability, and all that. You need to go through that exercise with the team. So it's sort of a tricky balance in terms of, you know, giving them some expectations before the team is created, and then revisiting that and doing a mission statement and then from that a code of conduct. So it's a bit of a tricky coaching balance, but